Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra deck tech. Today I want to talk to you about kind of a cool new deck that I have put together and have been having success with on ladder climbing so far. But you know the drill. Before we do, hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content, and let me briefly introduce you to today's sponsor before we dive into the deck. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. Alright, so what we have here is basically the new phase of Nox Ezreal. The deck is kind of old, like it has been around before. In the past it was a Draven Ezreal deck, which was always a bit odd to me because Draven actually doesn't add that much to Ezreal. Sure, it gives you nice support for your rummages and stuff, but Draven is a very aggressive champion that doesn't do a whole lot towards the Ezreal game plan, and the deck as a whole wasn't quite aggressive enough to benefit from that either, so it was a bit in a weird place. It had some success for a while, due to its novelty, but ultimately didn't quite have the same power and coherence, I think, as other Ezreal strategies like Freljord or Ionia. But I think some of that has changed with the new cards. Basically, I think 2 or 3 days ago, I faced 1 or 2 people playing an Ezreal Swain deck. I didn't see too much of the deck other than like the obvious cards, but I kind of liked the idea of basically replacing Draven with Swain, since Swain is a much more sort of mid-rangey and offense-defense kind of unit. He has a lot of offensive capabilities, but he also has high health, so he blocks well. His Leviathan is a really powerful threat and board control tool together with Swain. His champion spell is also pretty solid in a controlling and like Ezreal deck because it is removal. So there are a lot of like nice things going well together, so I decided to give the archetype a try of my own. I didn't really look at other lists. I just basically faced 2 or 3 people during my stream playing something like that, and I was like, hey, that could be a cool concept that might have some appeal, so I'll put together a list of my own. And this is where I'm currently at, and I'll walk you through it and talk to you about the cards. So first off, we have kind of the like typical PNZ Ezreal part. 3 beam, really not much to discuss here. It's just a very sort of flexible removal in terms of what it can kill. It's a bit inflexible in how to use it because it spends all your mana and stuff, but it's still the only good removal to deal with big threats other than if they are damaged with Guillotine. So just a very good card, and it can be cheap removal, it can be expensive removal depending on your mana situation, so it's just a really nice card. Same with Mystic Shot, it's cheap, it's efficient and flexible, it's not the most powerful, 2 damage for 2 mana, it's not amazing or anything, but it can also help you kill the opponent later with Ezreal, which is a nice bonus and matters a fair share of the time actually. And we have this 3 Static Shock, same here, pings to the face, generates 2 targets, 2 target triggers for Ezreal's level up, replaces itself, turns on damage-based removal like Guillotine and Flock, which is pretty great. And then we have 3 Progress Day, kind of the bread and butter of most Ezreal decks, especially if they don't have Karma for card advantage. And yeah, it's just really good at that, and the deck has a fair share of cheaper removal that works well with this. And then we have the new tool Gotcha, which kind of replaced Get Excited. I'm still not 100% sure on 0 Get Excited, but I'm currently trying 3 Gotcha. At some point I had 2 Gotcha and 2 Get Excited and 0 Culling Strike. But I want to try 3 Gotcha, 0 Get Excited to see how that plays. There's also potential that the Culling Strike should be a Get Excited, or the 3rd Gotcha should be a Get Excited. There are a couple of possibilities here, but for now I want to see if you can get away without having to discard a card. Because sure, if you have a Chump Wump, then Get Excited is great, because the cost is not really there. But if you don't, the cost is pretty real. And even if you have a Chump Wump, sometimes you rather keep the Clouds for Ezreal combo value also, so it's not entirely free even with Chump Wump. So let's talk about the other cards. Like, then we have the Noxian part of removal. A bunch of it is new. Like, Ravenous Flock is a great addition to the deck. It's super cheap, it deals a lot of damage, so it's great at leveling Swain and leveling Ezreal. It also synergizes really well with the Arachnoid Sentry, which is another card that helps level up Ezreal and control the board. Then we have a Culling Strike, particularly great against Ezreal and Heimerdinger, and overall just a decent removal. It helps level Ezreal, but it doesn't help level Swain, unlike something like Get Excited, which is why the jury is still out. But it's also possible that the deck should have more than 1 Culling Strike to deal with cards like Heimerdinger reliably, because they can't Twin Discipline it, and the common line for them is to Twin Discipline to keep Heimerdinger alive, because they often want to drop it on 5 with 3 mana and deny costs 4, and they also only run 2 of these. So Culling Strike's pretty good against other Ezreal and Heimerdinger decks specifically, and decent against a bunch of other things. Then we have 2 Noxian Guillotine. They can sometimes be a bit restrictive, but they can also be really, really powerful if you can kill 2 or 3 things with this. It's really amazing, helps a lot with Ezreal level up, it's so much card advantage, and yeah, works really well with static shocks and like house spider damage and stuff. So that leaves us basically with the units. We want some units simply because the removal in this game is kind of expensive and limited, so if you try to kill everything to not take too much damage, that often doesn't work, so having ways to block and chump block matters, and it's also good against like more reactive controlling decks to have a couple of threats that aren't blank in your hand, because removal is bad against more controlling decks a lot of the time. So having a couple of units to just curve out and pressure them is really nice. Campunk is still a great threat. As a 3/2 it blocks well, it blocks fearsome, it trades with a bunch of stuff, and if there's nothing to block or trade with, it is a really great threat on its own, and Campunk into Sentry can sometimes give you some really nice snowball value. 2 House Spiders, it's a bit underpowered and situational, but when it's good it can be pretty great for like trade with something, chump something else, turn on a Flock or a Guillotine. But currently I'm fine with 2, because drawing multiples can be pretty bad in most matchups. So 2 seems like a decent number to have a bit more board presence and ways to turn on your Flocks and Guillotines in a more meaningful way. Then we have the Sentries that greatly support Campunk, support Ezreal, help with Flock, just an overall great card in the deck. Similar to the Archers in the Freljord version, for example. Then we have Chump Wump, just a very robust offense-defense unit, obviously less good at trading since it lost its 4th health, so it's trading down more often, but it still does a good enough job and is kind of a mainstay in Ezreal decks regardless. Then we have 2 Leviathan. I really, really like this card, and I have been trying in various Swain decks with Swain Leviathan because of Leviathan being such a powerful late-game plan that a lot of decks of varying proactivity and reactivity have a lot of issues with, especially doubled with Swain. So glad to have come across this deck where that seems promising and can support Swain and Leviathan meaningfully. I issued the 3rd Leviathan here because we already have 3 Progress Days, so that's a lot of 8 cost cards, making the deck reasonably clunky. So, and you draw like extra cards with Progress Day, making the third Leviathan a little less important, especially because we also have Ezreal as a win condition. So 2 seems like the right number, regardless of it being so powerful that in most decks you would want 3, where you can afford it, but this deck can't really afford it and doesn't need it as much. Yeah, and then we have Swain, that I already mentioned, so not much to say here. Yeah, the deck basically plays like any Ezreal deck. You're trying to sort of control the pace of the game, keep the board in check, get damage in where you can to make the job easier for Ezreal, get your Ezreals and Swains leveled, and kind of start turning on the opponent. And yeah, I've been really enjoying this deck and it has done really well. I'm currently like 14-6, and 1 or 2 of the losses felt really really unlucky kind of outliers where the games were really close, and most of the wins didn't feel like lucky or super close that I should have lost in most cases, but won anyway. The deck just overall in those 20 games so far felt really robust and well-rounded, and like it could be a real contender for like a higher tier deck, like a good tier 2 deck or maybe even a tier 1 deck, and a contender for the go-to sort of Ezreal direction. So I'm quite excited about the deck and have had a lot of fun and success playing it so far, and I'll keep testing it on my stream probably to see how it keeps performing and how my opinion changes and where I feel the deck sort of fits in, if it will stay in like a good tier 2 or even like a tier 1 potential position, or if it just kind of was doing well initially but turns out to be more mediocre. But it just played pretty robust, and it even performed notably better against something like Enduring SI, which was one of the matchups I was the most concerned about initially, but I faced it quite a bunch and the games mostly went in my favor, even against like double Endure. So in a lot of cases they would need something like double Dehu Endure and an Atrocity to win, and if that's what they need to win, then the matchup should be favorable, because that's like 3 out of 5 cards when everything else they have is not going to be enough to usually beat you. Then you should be favored. And yeah, the deck is better at dealing with Dehu Endure specifically than I initially was afraid it would, between racing it, kind of controlling it, or sometimes even just killing it. So yeah, those are my thoughts so far. Deck kind of plays like any Ezreal deck really. You wanna Mulligan in most matchups for like early game plan, so cheap removal, early units, against sort of reactive, more controlling decks where you are a bit more the aggressor. You obviously want less removal. A lot of the removal isn't that great. You might want like 1 removal for something like their Monk and stuff like that, like their scarier early units, and otherwise just units to be a bit more proactive. You can see against particularly slow decks to sometimes keep Progress Day in your opening hand, because it's just such a game breaker. I've been experimenting with this and so far liking keeping Progress Day against slower decks. And yeah, otherwise just kind of make sure that your hand is functional and has a plan, and think about what they have in their deck, how the cards you have in your opening hand might line up against them, how the early turns might look, and yeah, replace cards accordingly and keep cards accordingly. That's just a general rule for mulliganing. Imagine how your things line up against their things more likely and which cards matter. Like for example, if you're facing a Vi Heimerdinger deck, they play Monks, and Monk is a pretty relevant threat that you can't ignore. So if I have a Thermo Beam in my opening hand against a Vi Heimerdinger deck, I'm gonna keep it because it is a reliable way of getting rid of that Monk that otherwise would cause a lot of trouble. While a lot of the other removal, like Mystic Shot for example, is not very good in that matchup. Or like Culling Strike could be okay to keep because of Heimerdinger specifically, but not sure if that's worth it, because otherwise it's kind of underwhelming. And like I said, Progress Day seems like a great keep in matchups where you're not under as much pressure, and it's more about resources and grinding. So yeah, that's the deck. We're gonna hop into some games in Master. I climbed up notably with this deck and Elusives and some other testing. I think last time I was around like 2,500, now I'm back in around close to top 700, and I'll try to climb higher before the end of the season to get a nice finish, maybe like top 100, maybe even higher. We'll see how high we get. I'm not gonna like drive myself crazy over rank. Climbing is so sort of anemic and hostile in this game right now with the heavy swings and the crazy win rates you need to even be climbing. Once you hit like top 200, top 100, that it's just not very feasible to just like, yeah, drive yourself crazy over it and kill the fun of playing the game and getting frustrated by these stupid swings. But we'll get some change on that in the future that will probably make climbing a more feasible sort of core goal, which is nice. So yeah, that's it for the deck. I'll be back in a moment with the second video with 4 games in Masters Rank to see how we're doing and show you how to pilot the deck. So stay tuned and I'll see you in a moment.